Welcome to the Ambitious Coach Lab, powered by 90. I'm your host, Dr. Cam Lawson. Each week, we explore the real tactics, tough conversations, and breakthrough moments that drive coaching success. Let's jump into today's episode. All right. Well, hello, friends. We have a very special episode today. We have my father, Dr. Darren Lawson, with us today. My dad is the founder and consultant with Paradox Communication Consulting. We will dive all into that because we did a little bit of a joint venture together on that, and so we'll unpack that a little bit. But we're going to talk all things really about how he's developed his offering, and then a little bit about his mastery of how he has a unique offering as a PhD in the business world. Those are rarities. So, welcome to the show, Dad. Super excited to have you.
Thanks, Cameron. I love being here and love what you're doing with the show. So yeah, it's a great honor to be here with you today.
It's kind of one of those, I feel like the pressure is higher. It's like you got like, like gotta interview my dad. What is this? So no, it's gonna be fun. So, but I mean, to kick it off, why don't you share a little bit about kind of your journey into consulting? Because obviously, I
Yeah.
have a little bit of color, but would love to have you share that for our listeners.
Well, for me, it started 36 years ago. And I would love to say it was like this magical, like transition into consulting, but it was as simple as this. And it kind of created phase one of the consulting that I'm doing. So in higher ed, you always have your summers off. So you're generally looking, well, what am I going to do this summer to make some money and what all? So back in 1990, two of my colleagues, David and Charlotte Burke, and I were teaching business communication courses in higher ed, and we loved that. And so, I think it was toward the end of the second semester in 1990, we were all talking about, well, what are you going to do this summer? I don't know yet. What about you? And it was a yearly thing. But then we came up with the idea: wouldn't it be great if we could take what we're teaching in the business comm classroom and take it out to local businesses? So we founded, it was at the time was called Professionally Speaking, a communication consultant service. And initially, we tried to kind of do a direct market to local businesses and organizations, and we found it difficult because they didn't know who we were. They had never seen our work before, so it was like that didn't work. So then we changed our approach and we ended up going through the local community colleges that offered professional development to local businesses. And so we started with Greenville Tech, South Carolina's largest technical college, and they hired us to come in and do a 6-hour seminar. Uh, and it was great. Working with Greenville Tech was just ideal because they took care of promoting it. They took care of enrolling participants and then giving us space to hold the training. So from that standpoint, it was a great segue into the industry, but doing it indirectly through the community colleges. And then what would happen? Attendees would come and they would really, really enjoy what we had done in the training session. And they would go back to their bosses and say, "Oh, you should get Darren Lawson and Charlotte Burke and David Burke to come and do some consulting." So that worked great. Then what happened was the tech colleges would share with each other. So Greenville Tech recommended it to Tri County Tech, and Tri County Tech would hire us to come in, and then Tri County Tech recommended it to Denmark Technical College.
Mm.
So before we knew it, we were accidentally into the system, and for 10 years we basically continued with that, and that was doing the stand up training, and I loved it. It was great. And then we kind of had to make a transition because both the Burks and I were leaving on leaves of absence to do our doctoral work. You were 1 year old, and their son was about 6 months old, and we all took out and moved to different parts of the country and did our doctoral work. And that was just great because my doctoral work included courses in training and development and communication assessment. So that was phase one. That was phase one of it. And then I would say phase 2, after we did our doctoral degrees, we kind of changed our approach slightly. We rebranded into Millennium Communication because it was, turning into the millennium, and we thought that was really cool at the time. Didn't think about, well, what happens 20 years from now, when it's not the millennium anymore, but that was where we were at the time. And we continued offering training seminars, but we broadened to include 2 more areas, and that was facilitated process improvement, going
Mm,
into an organization, a department, or a location, and facilitating the discussion of the employees that were experiencing tension points. And then we would help guide them out of that. And I can talk about that later on too. The second thing we started doing was organization wide assessment. And that was something that we had both learned in our doctoral degrees. And to be honest, Cameron, I found that these 2 new areas were much more fulfilling for me
mm.
as opposed to doing a 6-hour seminar. And so that was a nice change, but I can still do that, but now I've got these additional tools. And then phase 3, and that's kind of where we started today. It happened in 2024, um, and I transitioned away from higher education, and I decided to go full time with the consulting business, which I have to point to you as putting that idea in my head. And so I really appreciated that because it was like, wow, I hadn't thought about this, but you were like, hey, maybe we should do something together. So 2 years ago, I rebranded once again to Paradox Communication Consulting. And again, I've done everything that I've been doing for 30 years, but I've added 2 additional tools in my toolbox. And the first of those is coaching.
Mm,
So I went through the training process and I've become a certified executive coach. I've also become a certified organizational development coach and finally a certified change management coach. So coaching's a little different because I want to work one on one or maybe with a small group of people. And I don't necessarily give them the answers, I just guide the answers out of them. So that's been a lot of fun to do. And then the second thing I did, and again, I have you to thank for that because we went to a session on fractional work together. And I was like, wow, this is something maybe I could do. So now I can offer businesses communication support on a fractional basis.
mm.
So that's the 36-year journey into the consulting world. So I hope that answered your question.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's amazing, kinda hearing you talk about that because there has been so much, change in the world,
Yes,
over
yes,
36 years, and,
yes.
I mean, even the iterations strictly from a brand standpoint are fascinating, like, I had kinda forgotten about some of that, of how, there are iterations of things, and then little you kinda touched on it a little bit, but then a big stint as a dean of a university, teaching and almost doing the consulting and communication work, but from an academic standpoint, like, there's just so much well-roundedness that probably
Mhm.
came from that, but let's talk about kinda the most recent iteration, right? So when you transitioned out of academia, maybe what was maybe one of the biggest surprises, kinda getting back into more of, like, the full-time consultant work?
Yeah, yeah. I think the biggest surprise, and maybe it wasn't a surprise, but I just found how hungry leaders are for
Mm,
clarity. They want, to get the business from point A to point B in as clear and as communicative a way as possible. So that was a good reminder to me because the change hasn't occurred. And then in academia, we kind of debate ideas, we discuss theories, we apply them to case studies. All of that's good, to help an 18 to 22-year-old kind of think through that. But in business, what I found is that people want traction. They
mm,
want frameworks that can help them make decisions today. The bottom line, they want outcomes with demonstrated success. So that was something I had to make a transition to. And another surprise was just how my academic background translated. I
mm,
assumed I might have to reinvent myself. Instead, I found that organizations just desperately need someone who can help them diagnose the communication tension points they're having, interpret the behavior, and then give language and structure so that people who are feeling these tension points can articulate them through me to top management. And
Mm,
so during my 35 years, I guess I've had a foot in the academic rowboat, and I've also had a foot in the consulting rowboat. And so sometimes that can be a little feeling weird because you don't feel like you've got your footing in either one. But I found that my academic side provided kind of theoretical pegs on the wall. That's how I used to describe it to my
mm,
students. That if they're explaining something to me, I can go over and say, you know what, that sounds like, and then hang it on that peg. And so what I found is my training in academia gave me those pegs to help the business world hang different issues. And in turn, my
mm,
experience in the business world fed back into my teaching.
yeah.
My credibility was enhanced. I usually the first day of class, I would say, I also founded my own consulting company in 1990, and I have been consistently working with businesses to help improve their communication. Wow, did you see the eyes look up and go, oh, this guy knows what he's talking about. It's not
Mm.
just book knowledge. It's actually he's out working with actual business clients. So I, I found the two, and now that I've got the the foot out of the academia rowboat, I've stepped over into the consulting rowboat and am feeling a little bit less problematic now.
Yeah, no, that I mean, I can attest to that when you have professors that quote unquote have kind of lived in the real world or
Yeah,
whatever.
yeah,
It just adds validity or even just you want to dive into it a little bit more
yep,
because it's most of the time your students aren't necessarily looking to get into higher education, right, to be
right,
teachers. They're
right.
taking their knowledge and then moving into the business world. So I think those that have had that level of experience just become that much more unique. And
Mm,
I love how you tied it to it made you more well-rounded where you can
yeah,
go to the theoretical and there's a little bit of intentionality on this last iteration from a brand standpoint that you actually
mm,
came up with. We called it, paradox communication, which is actually a little bit of a play on words, very
mm,
subtle play on words, that it's a pair of docs.
mm.
Paradox communication, a pair of
That's
docs. And
right.
so
That's right.
there's a little bit of, hey, there's not a lot of PhDs running around the business world, but we actually, I would argue, need that because
Yes.
that level of theoretical understanding and level of thinking on business cases is
Mm,
something that there are a lot of consultants out there and coaches that just are good at branding themselves. But I think having the level of depth of a PhD coming in, because there gets to a point where you get
mm.
complex enough that you don't need just an MBA. You do need a little bit deeper thinking
Yeah,
about the specific, you know, lane that you're struggling with or whatnot.
sure.
And so I think that's a really unique aspect and you've really built your offering around that. Can we talk a little bit about kind of how you've packaged one of the competencies that we talk a lot about here on this show is offering. Once you kind of understand the vision for your practice, which you've had that in place since, 1990,
Yep.
but you gotta start to go and kind of build and package an offering
Mm,
together that you're actually gonna go and sell, and I would say that
yeah.
probably a lot of coaches and consultants think that they need to create something completely new. You kind of alluded to that when you said you felt like you had to reinvent
Mm,
yourself, but in reality, you didn't. It was actually already there. So, can you talk about how you identified what businesses would actually pay for? You've got a couple different offerings
yeah,
out there, but can you talk
yeah,
to that a little bit?
yeah, absolutely. I think I pay attention to the pain points that the leaders repeat to me. So, in other
Mm,
words, tell me what attention you're experiencing right now, and not just surface complaints. I want the patterns underneath that are causing it, because sometimes you can. It's like I heard a great presentation one time, or on are you picking fruits or killing roots?
mm,
And sometimes a consultant can go in and just kind of help the client pick all the apples off the apple tree, and then next year, guess what? All the apples are back. And so they didn't really deal with the root cause of this. So,
mm,
so I try to listen very carefully to what they think are the actual root problems that they're having. And generally they come up a number of ways. I think the first way is maybe some misalignment at the leadership level.
Mm,
Maybe it's not getting translated down to the employees as well as it should be. Second, I think breakdowns across departments. You have this department, on the hamster wheel running really fast, and this one's over here, and they're not working together. And then I think the other is just teams that are very busy, but they're not coordinated. They're not working
mm,
toward the same goals. So when you hear the same problems across industries, I found that I didn't need to invent something new.
mm.
Honestly, the same problems that we're having today are the problems that organizations were having 35, 40 years ago.
Yeah.
And so that's where I felt like I didn't need to reinvent that.
Mm,
So I ended up packaging what I already knew in a way that helped solve those problems. I guess the metaphor that I keep coming back to is, as a consultant, you need to constantly be expanding the tools in your toolbox.
mhm,
My father laid carpet, and so in his toolbox were all of these different instruments that were used for different things. And so, you pull out a tool and go, "Oh yeah, that's used for this," or "Here's the kicker," or "Here's the stretcher," but they were all used for something very specific. And so I just have kept expanding my toolbox. And I just think that businesses are going to pay for that because the extra tools are going to provide clarity and speed and reduce some of those friction points. So I
mm.
I think I've built the business around delivering exactly that. You may disagree with me. You kind of are looking at it from the outside, but that's kind of what's in the back of my mind as I've driven into the next
Oh,
phase of this.
yeah, and I mean, I'm sure that's evolved over time. I mean,
Yeah,
in the even all the way stretching all the way back to the early days, but,
yeah,
you know, as new things like AI and digital
mm,
communication has come in, I mean, I'm sure that's, like, made you have to rethink because now there's
mm,
I think for better or for worse, there's a
mm.
lot of communication channels where it can be, a call, a Slack message, an email, a social media post, all these different things that we have information coming at us and it is
Oh,
can be a little overwhelming. And so I think you have to start to build new versions of, okay, let's help this leader think through, man, you can't just tap into just email communication anymore. You have to expand that.
yeah,
Or to the younger leader, maybe you can't have 10 different channels. Like
yeah.
nobody knows where anything is. It's so
Well, I'm
I mean,
afraid
head
we're gonna get to the point that my AI is talking to your AI, and neither you nor I know what's being discussed.
yeah,
And
that's
so I think
terrifying.
the people element, I think, has always got to be there, and I know that's important for you. We've had discussions about that, and it's important for me as well.
Yeah, I mean, I think it the complications that you
Mm,
have now with messages and all of these things that, you know, it just the way that we interpret things
yeah,
is a lot more complex now. You always say that people are was it far more complex than our overly simplistic perception of them. I've said that
yeah,
many
yeah,
times and I think nowadays in just the world we live in, the perception that we have of people, whether that's through social media or through an email that was sent or whatever it is
mhm,
far more complex than the actual. So
yeah,
I think that's the
yeah,
human element that we have to lean into a lot.
sure.
But I mean, you talked to a little bit of these, but can you talk to some of the examples of just organizational communication issues that leaders maybe often overlook in their organizations? I'm sure there are a lot of things that I mean, it's a pretty weighty topic. I would say most leaders would probably say
Yeah,
they struggle with something along that lines, but can you kind of talk to things that
sure.
maybe are missed a lot?
Yeah, I think one that comes to mind immediately is personal feedback.
Hmm,
So we all desire personal feedback about how we're doing. If it's I need to correct something or hey, you're doing something really well. And a lot of times organizations early on will give a great deal of personal feedback during the onboarding process. And then there comes a point where they just stop and they stop giving you personal feedback because, oh, well, you're trained now, you know. And so I have found that when I measure things in the organization, I take a look at tenure. So I'll look at 0 to 1 year, and that group, I want to see how satisfied they are with the communication in the organization. And then I've worked with companies that suddenly at the 1 year mark, the satisfaction level just drops, and the organization's like, well, what in the world are we doing? And I said, you've stopped giving them personal feedback that you gave them in the onboarding process. And they're like,
Mm,
oh, we haven't thought about that. So I think that's one thing, personal feedback.
yeah.
I think sometimes maybe an assumed alignment. Leaders think they're on the same page because they're in the same room with the employee, but they're not. So that's a major issue. This one is a big one. I think message drift, a clear message from the top uh, CEO, top person. He meets with his or her VPs, and he says, "This is the message I want to go." So each of the VPs takes it individually and goes to their directors, and then their directors go to the managers. By the time it's made it through all of those different iterations, you have all sorts of interpretations. And it's like, wait a minute, our manager didn't tell us this.
Mm.
Yours did. That's so important. I think that there has to be crafted very specific language and maybe distributed via writing as opposed to orally given. So that's just something to think about.
Mm.
Um, Another one is relationship with your immediate supervisor. I can't emphasize this one enough. You've probably heard the saying that people don't leave organizations, they leave immediate supervisors. And
Yep.
so I think much happens there where they may like the climate of the organization, but they just have a lousy working relationship with their supervisor. Lastly, I would say maybe nonverbal contradictions. That's something that I'm very interested in, and that's leaders um, saying one thing with the text, but then they're saying another thing in their tone
Mm,
of voice or
mm.
timing or behavior, and it really starts working against them. So, and these aren't dramatic failures or anything like that, but they're small cracks that start to create structural elements later on when we're trying to deal with some of these issues.
We could dive into that nonverbal one,
Yeah.
go on a whole 'nother episode on that because it's so true. I mean, I have seen so many where, even, if the leader has their camera off on a Zoom call or they're distracted and you can clearly tell they're
Yes.
not engaged, like, those
Yes.
things talk very loudly, and
Yes, they
it's
do.
something that it's almost and now, I mean, everything is, recorded, and so now it's like there's just so much, pressure on leaders to
Mhm.
have an understanding of not just the message that they're communicating through their
That's right.
words, but also through, "Okay, I am here, I am engaged,
Mhm.
and the way that I say it, the way that I present things, my
That's
body
right.
language, all of that is communicating, and I
That's right.
think that's something that I would argue that is not taught, and so it's not that leaders are intentionally, hiding things or acting in a way that's wrong. It's I think truly just people don't know how to convey themselves through whether
Yeah.
it's a video conference too or even just up on stage. So I think that's a massive gap, but that's fascinating.
Yeah, twice in my consulting, I've been hired to go undercover in an organization
Mm.
and watch what the employees and the bosses are doing, and then come back and report, "Here's what you were doing. Did you intend this? Because this is
Mm.
how it was being perceived." So that was a lot of fun, and that's something that I'm not aware that other consultants are doing is going undercover, which is a lot of fun.
That is, yeah, I I always joke with people that, I could never lie to you. I had like a FBI level, interpreter. And, I think you let me many times, I'm sure you knew.
I
But,
probably did, yeah.
yeah, 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 it's not hard. Now that I have a son, it's like, "You are clearly not telling me the
Uh-huh.
truth," but I know that.
That's right. That's right.
But well, that's fascinating. Well, I mean, let's transition. So one of the other competencies that we talk about a lot is mastery. And so
Mhm.
I would love to just dive a little bit in because you and I are unique that we both have PhDs.
Yeah.
Right, you have had your PhD a lot longer than I have.
Mhm.
So I mean, how has that depth of
Mm.
expertise led to a competitive advantage for you? You talked a little bit about that in
Yeah.
your intro, so I'd love to
Yeah.
dive into that.
Well, for me, I felt qualified when I had my master's degree going out doing consulting. But it wasn't until I came back with my PhD that it elevated me just off the
Mm,
charts in terms of what I knew. And I would say the first things that come to mind for me that were beneficial were my quantitative and qualitative skills that were required as part of my
mm,
doctoral work. So these skills directly benefit the clients that I'm working with since I don't have to outsource them to someone else. If I need to
mm,
design and administer a survey, then I can do that. If I need to analyze data using statistical methods, I can do that. If I need to conduct interviews or focus groups, I can do that, or and then do content analysis of that. I'm comfortable with all of that now,
mm,
and so I think that benefited me. I think secondarily, my PhD from the University of Kansas was really unique. And I came into the program, and it was an equal balance of theoretical and practical. So I took some courses about communication theory, but I was also taking courses in communication assessment, working
mm.
with an actual business. And so from that standpoint, KU greatly prepared me. And so I tell people, don't be scared off by a PhD. That was not my case, and I know yours was like that as well.
Mhm.
So it provided me my PhD with the depth of so the type of consultant that can see things that others cannot. I'm not sure if that makes sense, but I
Yeah.
think I can come in and I can name tension points that leaders feel but they can't articulate,
Mm.
and I can explain when a team is stuck that they're not just stuck. It really is. It's like the organization's ground to a halt and they're stuck in the mud. And
Mhm.
so I have the ability to go, you know what? I'm not, I'm not, it doesn't affect me, but are you interested in getting out of that mud pit? And generally they're like, oh yeah, we do. So I help guide them into that and help build ladders out of the mud pit. And
Mm.
I find that very fulfilling and very helpful to them.
Do you find that the theoretical comes into play a lot in conversations versus the practical, "Here's what you need to do," like the traction, like you mentioned, nice EOS, play there, but, like,
Yeah,
the you know, because there is I mean, sure, we can all understand, certain practical things that need to be put in
yeah.
place, but sometimes understanding the theoretical, the meaning behind the meaning, that
Mhm.
aspect, do you find that that tends to come into and probably elevate the conversation to another call it even just another conversation level or a higher, level of
Yeah,
thinking?
and you and I have had discussions about this, and we love talking theoretical type things. So I'm a big fan of Anthony Giddens and his notion of structure. Now, I'm not going to lead with that with a client
Right.
because I think they're going to be like, I don't know what you're talking about.
Mhm,
But if I boil Giddens down to its most bare essentials, it's the problem that you're going to be experiencing as an organization is either organizational structure, it's structure,
mhm,
or it's people. So
right.
let's have a good discussion about what you think is happening here. Is there something in the rules and the procedures and all of that that you're doing something that's preventing your employees from having a clear conversation? Or are there individuals who are pushing buttons to make things problematic for you? So and Giddens would say it's a combination of the two.
Yeah.
So that's how I'm bringing a theoretical framework and making it practical in some for someone who is in the business arena and just saying, hey, is it structural or is it people
Mm.
or is it both? And can we make
Yeah.
changes on both of those? Does that Does that make
Yeah,
sense
oh,
in
yeah,
terms of?
yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, even I would argue a business operating system
Mm,
is a structure for
absolutely.
managing human energy, right?
Yes.
You're putting
Yes.
the procedures and the agendas and
That's
the
right.
regular cadence of things, which is the structure to manage the people in your organization, all from the leadership team all the way down
Mm,
to the front level employees. We're putting in
mm,
core values to where you can
right.
understand how you belong to the organization. Do you
That's right.
believe in what we're doing? Here's what we're going. I mean, all of these things are put into place
Mm,
to manage the humans, and they influence each other, right?
that's
You
right.
know, the you have the right structures in place, you're gonna get the right
Mm,
behaviors out of your employees, and as those behaviors go, that's gonna reinforce your structure, and when you get the
mm,
wrong people in there, it starts to feel odd, and so, yeah, I mean, it's 100% you
yeah.
boil it down, but I think having that higher level of thinking to almost flesh it
Mm,
out in your brain, even if it's just in
mm,
your brain, it allows you to guide the conversation in a
mm,
much more intelligent way versus kind of trying to like figure it out in very minute concepts. It's
mm,
like, hey, you've got a pretty big realm to play in. And
yeah.
so I think that's a very unique thing that the higher up in education that I think you go, and it's
Mm,
not for everybody, but I think it does give you a little bit of a competitive advantage.
yeah, I think so. And the conversations that you and I have had about EOS, to me, companies that don't have that scaffolding,
Yep.
would benefit from an EOS system that would give them the structure for better communication. And so
Mm,
there are a lot of companies out there that my first thing is like, you don't really have a clear structure. And I found myself going, oh well, I'm not an expert in this, but my son deals with EOS. This is something you should
mhm,
consider. And then the people issue, I don't know if there's a system and structure out there that's going to take care of all the problems that you're having, but there are ideas that can help free up that people portion of things. And so that's yeah, I think that theoretical is informing my understanding of basic issues that companies are having.
so let's shift gears here a little bit because
Yeah.
I wanna continue down the path of mastery, but I feel like in today's age with AI and social media and
Mm,
personal brands and whatnot, I mean, you could call yourself an expert about just about anything online, and who's to refute you?
yeah.
And you can start to go out, and there's a lot of that out there right now.
Mm,
In your mind, what does true mastery in a way that differentiates actually look like for a coach, a consultant like you?
yeah. Yeah. I think people who are truly uh, understanding of the discipline, they don't try to oversimplify it, but they also don't try to hide behind jargon. So
Mm,
they make the complex accessible without making it shallow, if that makes sense. And so mastery is that ability to diagnose precisely and intervene effectively. And it's not about having the answers.
mm,
It really comes down to how knowing which questions really matter to guide them out of this and maybe pull the solution out of them. And I think that's probably one thing that I've changed in the last 35 years is it's much more um, effective to pull the answers out of the client as opposed to me coming in, swooping in and saying, here's what you need to do.
mhm,
If they have this aha moment of, oh, this is what this is what's been our
yeah,
problem, and getting that down, I may help guide them and say, okay, now let's structure this. Let's organize this
mm,
in a rank order, like what's most important down to what's maybe least important. And the buy-in and the expressions on clients' faces when they come up with a notion, to me, true mastery is that ability to step back and you don't get the praise for coming up with the idea,
mm.
but you see the employee benefiting or the manager or the leader benefiting from having come up with it him or herself.
Yeah, I mean, that's really almost if you boil it down from a definition of a coach versus a consultant, right? I
Yeah,
mean, the
yeah,
coach is gonna pull out and guide and facilitate in a way that the team is going to reach the conclusion
that's
versus
right.
the consultant in a traditional sense is paid based on their opinion, right? I'm going
Yeah,
to come in and offer my opinion, and in certain situations it should 100%. If you
yeah,
do
yeah,
an analysis of an entire company's organizational issues, they're paying you to come in and run that and then provide,
true.
takeaways for them on that. But I
Yes.
think in the way that you go in and navigate that, I completely agree. The buy-in that you're gonna get if the
Mhm.
team comes to that conclusion and they feel that it was their solution, they're gonna
That's
go
right.
100% harder at
Yeah,
that than,
yeah,
"Okay, well, Darren over here gave me, this recommendation, and that's great. It's probably fine." But it's just human nature to kind of, at least most entrepreneurs and
yeah,
they're going to buck that
yeah.
because they want to be the ones that come up with it. So I think that's a really interesting, and I think one of the things that separates the ambitious coaches, if you will, from
Mm,
the mediocre ones is that aspect, the
mm,
ability to come in and facilitate in a way that is leading to that fruitful conversation to where the
yeah,
team is working as a unit to get to that point. I think
that's
that
right.
master of facilitation is something that people have to learn. It's a learned skill. It's not something that's just inherent, which is means you can gain it, but
Mhm.
it's an art, being in the session room and working with a team where you have lots
That's
of
right.
emotional, you're gonna have a split. You're gonna have people that are all on board with things, and you're gonna have those people that are a little bit on the fence. Like, how have
Mhm,
you dealt with those kinds of personalities? Because you and I have dialogued a little bit on that, even some of your fractional work. There's always interesting characters, right, that are maybe a
mhm,
little bit against things, but how do you navigate that from just almost an emotional
mm.
intelligence aspect of dealing with those people that are not quite bought in to whether it's the
Yeah,
solution or whatever?
I think it's the ability to read the room. When you're in
Mm,
there facilitating, I read a great book one time on how to deal with difficult people in a team setting. And
mm,
so they had their different personality types, and then they had some strategies for, say this to this type of person, but don't say this. And I read that book and I was like, wow, that's really a helpful pieces of information. So now I can pretty much read the room again non-verbally, and figure out who is, this person's sitting, like this, or
mm.
they're putting up barriers between themselves and you. They're sending me signals that they're not buying into it. And so I read the room, and then I start working the room to kind of solve that. I may go to that person and just say, "Well, so and so, do you have any reservations about what the team is proposing here? Would you like to verbalize any of those?" And a lot of times they will. They appreciate the opportunity, and to be given the opportunity to do that. There may be others who are just being just obnoxiously, negative, and so I've had to, deal with that type of person in the room as well. But to me, it's just being able to read the room, have a high enough EQ that you're able to tell if someone's frustrated or angry or confused, or whatever the emotion is. Figure that out, diagnose it, and solve it on the spot is kind of how I say.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah, that emotional intelligence to pick
Mm,
up on that is something that as
yeah,
coaches and consultants, you have to develop that
that's right.
because you are dealing with a bunch of humans who are bringing all sorts of baggage, whether that's
Yep.
personal or professional, into
Yeah,
a room, and you don't know what's going to happen in that room, that
that's
there's
right.
something may trigger, or somebody needs a little bit of extra, or we need to have the ability that, hey, this person has actually been really quiet. Let's
Mm,
invite them into the conversation, and having that wherewithal to kind of be able to
yeah.
get yourself up and above and be able to take a look at everything is a skill that I think separates the good from the great.
It's a little more difficult now when we're doing virtual meetings,
Hmm,
and we can turn off our cameras and we can mute ourselves. And so, as a facilitator, that makes it a little bit more difficult because people are able to put up those barriers so that you can't read what they're doing. So I
hmm,
think what I have to do is look at the ones that are silent and invisible and pull them in and say, "Hey, so and so, why don't you turn your camera on and join us and tell us a little bit about
mm.
what you think are the what's the greatest strength of this idea, maybe what's the biggest holdback." But it means getting them out, off their you know run doing errands around the house while
Yeah,
they're listening to a meeting. So
I know that's like everybody's, worst fear nowadays in the digital world. It's like, all right, cameras on, mics on.
that's
It's like,
right.
oh, I'm
That's right.
driving, like, or
I
whatever.
know. Yep.
Um, okay. So I wouldn't, I would be, it would be a failure on my part if we didn't tap into a little bit of theoretical or research based things. So I'm
Sure.
curious, from your perspective, whether this is a current, study or something from your past, what is maybe one concept from communication research that you feel like just comes up a lot that leaders should be aware of? Is there something that you would say kind of sums up or
Yeah.
just happens consistently that you think would be interesting for leaders to dive into?
Well, I think I've already alluded to this, but I'll come back and reiterate it again. And that is you need to understand the interplay between structure and the employees within that structure.
Hmm.
And so that comes back to the Giddens that I was talking earlier. Um, that structure plays a really strong role in shaping the individuals and what they can and they can't do, and
Hmm.
what ideas they can share. But then I think sometimes managers, they understand that, but they don't understand the individuals within that structure that are pushing out and
Hmm.
resisting and all of those things. So I just think you need to understand that interplay between the two. There
Hmm.
is this relationship, the structure shaping the individuals, but the individuals are in turn shaping the structure by pushing out against it, not following it, a number of different reasons. I ask, is the organizational structure one of the causes of the
Hmm.
communication tension? And then, or are individuals in the
Hmm.
organization the root of the problem? And could it be that there's a combination of the two? So that's just a great way to kind of come in and look at a problem and go, is it structural or is it people? Okay, if it's people, then is it this or this? And we can kind of force it into two different columns. And
Hmm.
I have found that to be extremely helpful post doctoral work. And
Yeah.
you know how I push Giddens. So
Yeah. Yeah. It's a loaded book, or books. Is there a resource? I mean, is there a get-ins for dummies, or like, is there a resource that you would point to that may be on the level? I mean, I'm happy to link to the books. I mean, my dissertation talks. I mean, I kind of break it down a little bit. Like, I'm happy to like point people to that. But is there a resource that you would point that maybe is a little bit more applicable from a business standpoint?
I wish there were something out there. There's like these heavy books that he's written, and then there are some very academic type articles.
Yeah,
A lot of my takeaways were delving into those and then coming and saying, now how can I extrapolate this
sure.
and work there? I guess I would say, um, if you think that your organizational issues may have to do with one of those two things, contact me. Let me know how I can maybe explain it in a way that helps you understand without having to go back and read all of the books. I found it very interesting that uh, then Prime Minister Tony Blair in England, he relied on Giddens heavily during his prime minister time in Parliament. And so I thought, now there was an example of someone who took a really heavy theoretical principle and kind of brought it down into running the country from a prime minister standpoint. So I always was like, wow, way to go, Prime Minister Blair, in recognizing the benefits of Giddens.
That's fascinating. Yeah, It is amazing how much practical application there is
Yeah.
even in the ecosystem of business operating systems of how
Mm.
much correlation there was.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, both Dad and I are, nerds when it comes to that. But maybe that's a white paper we could put together sometime of how it
Yeah, that's a good
applies
idea. That's a
to
very good idea.
uh, but yeah, well, man, this has been great. I really appreciate you kind of taking the time, and it's such a fun, obviously chatting with your father, which is fun, but it's been really amazing to watch you adapt and build this over time and then continue to like build the foundation to where now, leaning into this full time and the success that you've had has been fun to watch. And
Mm.
so I think of you truly. I mean, you are a master of this and you have built a great offering and you have a clear vision and you're good at business development and you do a good job managing your practice. I mean, you are an
Mm.
ambitious coach,
Thank you.
consultant. We couldn't do call it the ambitious coach, consultant, fractional executive. Like we just called it
Yeah.
coach. But you are one. And so but in conclusion, I always like to ask guests just two questions. If you
Yeah.
could go back, let's go. If you want to go all the way back to the the 1990s, but if you could go back to rookie Darren with all the knowledge and experience that you
Mm.
have in this current moment, what advice would you give yourself just starting out?
Well, you know my personality more than most, but I think if I had to go back and tell my younger self something, it would be you don't need to prove yourself. You
Mm,
don't have to work so hard to get the approval of clients. You need to serve the clients. And I think
mm,
that's as I've studied servant leadership, that has changed my opinion. I'm not there to impress you with me. I'm there to help you out of a problem. So I really thought early on I had to demonstrate expertise. But leaders, the clients, they don't want performance. They
mm.
want a partner that's going to help guide them to a better organizational life. So, yeah, I wish I could go back and save some time, but that's where I'm at now. So I'm appreciative that others taught me that as well.
Yeah, that's good. That's a good word for everybody because it is. I mean, it's a cutthroat industry, right? You're always
Yeah,
trying to have to prove
yeah,
yourself. You got to go out and pitch yourself and get people to buy into who you are, and then your self worth comes into that. So, I mean, it's very easy
yeah,
for coaches and consultants and fractional leaders to fall into that because it's like rejection can feel very personal because oftentimes it is personal. So you're just
mm,
not the right fit for them, but you can't take it on that level and
no,
if you
no,
have that mentality of I love one of the core values of EOS, which is help first. It's just show up,
mm,
help, be there,
mm,
serve. Then it's only gonna benefit from you. And I
yeah,
think you're a testament of that. You've seen that of how that's, opened up your practice for you.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
appreciate you sharing that. That's
sure.
meaningful. And then the second thing, so if this, previous question was more reflective, now we can take a little bit more just current state. Like, what's a lesson that you are in the middle of learning in this current moment?
For me, it goes down the path of work life balance.
Hmm,
And I'm finding that I need to build margin into my daily routine. And when I say margin, I mean just time for myself, rest, thought. Sometimes you get so busy on the hamster wheel that you really just don't have time to analyze individual problems. So the more I can rest, let me put it this way. I think I looked at rest as a luxury. It's like, oh well, I
mm,
can't afford that luxury right now, and it really ultimately provides me with a strategic advantage working with clients because if I'm in a good place mentally, rest, all of those things, I'm going to be in a better place to help serve the client. So
mm.
that's something I think I'm just going to always be working on and trying to maintain a better work life balance.
It's easy to, put the pedal down and not look
Mm,
back, and then pretty soon your personal life or health or whatever it
yeah,
is, emotional
yeah,
state is, falling to pieces, and that's not a healthy way to live. And so
that's right.
that's a good word. I appreciate you sharing that. Well, Thank
Sure.
you, Dad, for coming on and having this conversation. I know it's been beneficial for me. I mean, even opening up I've had a lot of context, but even things that I hadn't thought through. So
Mm.
I know it was beneficial for me, and I'm sure for many others. But let's say, I mean, if someone really wants to get in touch with you, they want to learn a little bit more about the communication consulting. That's a very niche focus. Like,
Yeah.
what's the best place to get in touch with you?
Well, you can go to my website, which is www.theparadoxway.com. And that explains some of what we do. It's got both my and your bios in there, and a way to contact us individually. And you're welcome to contact me. It's at Darren at theparadoxway.com. And I love dialoguing with you, and we can have an initial conversation and just see what your needs might be. I'm happy to do that, and would welcome anybody and everybody who has questions and needs some help.
Awesome. Yeah, we'll link out to all that in the show notes and some of the other resources we talked about if anybody wants to delve into the old Anthony Giddens book. But yeah, no, I really appreciate you taking the time to have this conversation. And yeah, it's one of those things that's we wanted to bring a wide range of not
Mm,
just EOS implementers or just fractional leaders or just coaches,
mm,
because I think we can learn from everybody in this
yeah,
space
yeah.
and the best of the best. And so I feel blessed every single day that I get to have conversations. And so it means a lot to me to have you on this show. So
Well, it's been an
it's been a
honor, Cameron, and thank you. And looking forward to continued collaboration going into the future. So thanks for having me on today.
absolutely. And thank you all for listening. We'll have many more episodes coming your way soon. Take care. That's it for today's episode of the Ambitious Coach Lab. My hope is that something here helps you sharpen your craft and keep building a coaching practice you're proud of. Before we wrap, a quick thank you to our sponsor, 90. If you're coaching leadership teams, having your clients run their entire world in 90 truly elevates your work. Vision, rocks, scorecards, issues, it all lives in one centralized place. The clarity keeps your clients aligned between sessions and makes every conversation you have with them more focused and more impactful. I've used 90 with over 500 leadership teams, and I can tell you it makes great companies better and great coaches even more effective. Feel free to use promo code AC20 for 20% off. Again, that's AC20 for 20% off. Thanks for hanging out with me today. I'm Cam, cheering you on as you grow your ambitious coaching practice. We'll see you next time.